ضيوفنا الكرام، رحبوا معنا بعماد عطوة، مدير الاتصالات والإعلام والتقنية في الشرق الأوسط باستراتيجي أند من الإمارات العربية المتحدة ومتحدثي هذه الجلسة.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Imad Atwi, Manager, Telecommunications, Media, Technology and Digital Middle East at Strategy and his panel.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining us in this exciting session. Thank you also for joining us after dinner, after lunch. Hope you're all caffeinated enough. The title of this panel is AI, Your Frenemy. And some people say that we're in the middle of the awakening of AI. There's so much that has happened in AI in the past 5 years than in the past 50 years combined. More than 100,000 robots have been produced in the past 5 years. There's around 8 billion devices connected to the internet, and this number is expected to increase to 20 billion in the next 7-8 years. The global contribution of AI to the world economy is set to be around 15 trillion by 2030. With all these fast-paced movements in AI and technology, one key question arises: what does that mean to the future of the career, to the future of work, and to the future of employees? And this is basically the discussion of this panel. We will discuss basically what is AI, what is its purpose, what are basically the unique skills that we need to develop in order to augment our capabilities in the age of AI, and how can corporations, governments, educational facilities actually work together and help us in doing so. So with doing that, I'd like to introduce our amazing panelists. They're the experts in their field. So starting from my left, so we have Dr. Julia Glidden, who's the General Manager of the Global Government Industry in IBM, and advising also the UN and the World Economic Forum and the European Commission. Next is Jaeyoung Lee, who's the president of KGMLab, a former politician as well, from Korea, and that are doing amazing work on the impact of innovation on society and the future. Professor Stephen Liu, who's the professor of artificial intelligence at Tsinghua University in Beijing, and who's also the adjunct professor of innovation at Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government in UAE. Last but not least, I'd like to welcome Jake Schwartz, who's the co-founder and CEO of General Assembly, which is a global company that's advancing the future of work, basically through training and multiple areas. With that, I would like to start off the discussion with you, Stefan. If you ask a lot of experts on their definition of AI, everyone would tend to have their own interpretation. Even if we ask clients, the first question that they ask is, what is AI? And there's variables on that front. So can you tell us in your own words as well, and I'd like to hear from other panelists, what is AI and what is its purpose?
Terrific. OK, 1, 2. Let's make it loud enough. 1, 2. OK. مساء الخير شباب. شكرا جزيلا. هذا المرة أولا في سعودي. هذا يعني أنا فرحان جدا أن أكون هنا.
I am very happy to be amongst you here.
Is a difficult task, particularly something as large topic as AI. I'll try my best. I would define AI ذكاء الاصطناعي as an attempt to model aspects of human cognition. In other words, as human beings, we do a lot of things, speech, vision, speech synthesis. We are able to communicate to each other. We prove theorems. We play games. We write music. We get angry at each other and so forth. So aspects of human cognition, how do you model this on machines? Now, this particular definition, in no small part, is influenced and informed by the late Professor Herbert Simon that I had the great pleasure to study under at Carnegie Mellon. He would probably define it a little more strongly. So he would say, for example, once you model these aspects of human cognition on machines, the machine is cognizant. the machine is intelligent. So that is known as a strong AI. Now, my view is a little less strong as this. That's the origin of Vakalestanae or AI has that history. One fascinating thing that I would add to this is the fact that some of the problems that they tackled are humanitarian in origin. In other words, how does an expert or pharmacist come to a medical diagnosis? So in modeling this on a computer lends itself to codes. So Herbert Simon and Alan Newell zoned in on aspects of human cognition that lended themselves to codifiability. And projects like Mycin and Dendrol have to do with medicines. I'd like to get back to this point at some point.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll start us off, hopefully.
Jake, do you have similar views on what is AI and what is its purpose on that?
Well, because we're in the business of really helping people develop the skill sets that allow them to compete and participate in this new economy, I would tend to almost take a simplifying view in a way, which is to think of it as AI is really a discrete set of practices that have evolved over time. It starts with the organization of data, really, and databases, which has been around for a very long time. And then on top of that, you put some sophisticated analysis techniques on top of that that we've evolved and started to use in business in many different ways, as well as other fields, especially in software, which is all about data and processing data. On top of that, you then have this a set of techniques that is known as machine learning, which is really training a machine to actually take in new data, reformulate its model of predictive behavior or whatever it's designed to do, and then recode and resort itself based on that. Okay. And then AI is sort of the abstraction of all of that to the point where in theory and sometimes in practice right now, an algorithm can actually figure out what model it should be without even initial guidance from a human. Yeah. But that stuff is very much in its infancy, and what we see primarily in the business world is that most companies are mostly still at the data engineering phase of getting the right information in the right places, and are on a much longer journey towards this place of AI really transforming the world the way we all imagine. Yeah.
Can I turn the question on its head a little? I think it's really important also to talk about what AI isn't. And before I do that, I just have to say, I've been coming to the Gulf region for over 10 years now, and to be in an event like this with so many bright, young, entrepreneurial visionaries, the future of the region, is a real career high. So, I mean, from the bottom of my heart, shukran for giving me the chance to share my views with you. Because my view and the view of the IBM Corporation about what AI isn't comes back to you and what you bring to your societies, which is your humanity, your essence, your passion, your vision, your creativity, because machines will never replace that. And that's why we like to talk about augmented intelligence at the IBM Corporation, not artificial intelligence. We like to talk about the technology tools with the proper regulatory and governance structures being a way to automate routine tasks, robotic tasks that can be done, that are automatic, that are repetitive, to free you up as you go into your careers, to do what you do best, which is to think, to engage with human beings, to empathize, to create, to have a vision for the future, to be compassionate and authentic. And so, I think it's just as important, again, as I said, to think about what AI isn't as what it is.
Yeah. And bouncing off your answer as well, can you give a concrete example of how AI can actually augment the capabilities from what you're doing also at IBM on that?
I like to give an example. I don't think any of the bright young people in this room, when they started school, said, when I grow up, I want to sit in a cubicle and stamp papers every day, making sure the same data is entered in the same form for the 15th millionth time. Nobody says, I want to be a bureaucrat. We do it because it's necessary for the social safety and functioning of our world, for the ethics of our financial transactions. But these, through the combination of AI and fast online technologies like blockchain, this becomes increasingly routine. So that instead, we can have your brains think about how do we actually transform city living so that it's more sustainable, so that it's more humanistic, so that it's more livable at its core, instead of becoming bureaucrats and processing those papers, which too much of the jobs of today take out our childlike creativity and just turn us into cogs. AI is great at stopping us from being cogs.
Yeah. And that's interesting because in a recent study in the US, the findings were that most careers and jobs, they constitute of around 20 to 30 discrete tasks. And AI would be able to automate and augment some of these tasks, but they won't be able to replace the whole career function or the roles and responsibilities of a certain job. So with that, I'd like to ask also, Jake, what AI can do in terms of tasks in the next 5, 10, or 15 years? And maybe Jaeyoung also, you can comment on that.
Well, I think we don't know.
Yeah.
But I think whatever that we're predicting, history shows that it tends to happen much quicker and faster than we expected. Now, as a former policymaker, AI is like the best, worst nightmare. Because it's a good thing because everyone knows that it is the next thing. Everyone knows it's the new economy. Everyone thinks it's the new fuel, or it's just a sense of the new growth model. So government, if not itself, at least have to have its private sector run with it.
Yeah.
But it poses challenges. So one of the many challenges, but maybe two of the big things is that, first of all, we have a General Assembly here. We will have to, if AI is going to be what it means, we're going to have to entirely overhaul, change the entire structure of education system. So traditional K-1 through 12, it's not going to work out. So that poses huge challenge for policymakers. And number two is actually job creation. Now, we've been saying that AI is going to take over entire job, but later, latest shows that it's not going to. And it's a good news, but still, there will be pain. Recently in Seoul, there was a application, this app, a mobile app that was introduced, and it is still being introduced. It's about carpool system, which is quite popular, I guess, in the US through Uber or whatever. But in Korea, with that app being introduced, we had about 60,000 taxi drivers coming to the street, had a huge demonstration. In fact, I'm here, one of the taxi drivers from my constituency called me and said, could you please come join our demonstration as a supporting politician? Now, we're going to have these challenges throughout entire sectors of societies.
Yep.
Before, also, again, as a student of histories, we know that industrializations have replaced some jobs, but before, we were quite confident that the replacing rate, although high, that these people will find new jobs through very simple retraining. But a lot of scholars are saying that this is not going to be possible. You're not going to have telemarketers or taxi driver or bus drivers be retrained to be an AI operator. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do with these people? With the life longevity now living up to 100 years, if they lose jobs at 50, if they cannot find jobs again, as a policymaker, it poses a huge challenge. So I think AI is a great thing, and I think it seems to be that the trend is that we're going to have to invest in it. Yep. And in fact, as a national competitiveness, all governments should be and will be investing a lot of time and effort into it. However, at the same time, we must come up with solutions. How are we going to lessen the pain that is going to be out there in a very big way.
Yep. And on that, Jake, what are basically the key skills that the young future leaders of tomorrow need to actually learn in order to cope with the new technology?
Well, I think that's a complex question, and I think there's two ways of answering it. One is to talk about the skills to participate in this sort of, in the growth of this new set of capabilities that we'll have as a society. I'm a big fan of learning skills around data analysis, data science, as well as sort of ancillary skills, things like digital marketing to software development, product management. Really the way that companies participating in this new economy are being structured, there are tons of very interesting jobs that create lots of career growth, but that's really in the short term. I think more broadly we can think about what are the skills that will not be able to be automated away, and I think that's where we talk about the human skills, but it's really about things around synthesis, management, problem identification, organization, leadership, right? I personally believe that most of the skills that make someone successful today will make them successful tomorrow as well. They just need to be repackaged and reformulated in a way. And so, I think it's actually a really key point to think about that. I don't really believe AI is a dramatic shift of what we've experienced over the last 100 years. In terms of what we've seen is a steady march of technological capability that has allowed us to do less of one thing and more of another. And we're still seeing that. The difference might be, and I say might, is that the speed at which this happens creates these moments of disruption, which is what we were just discussing. And I think that those moments of disruption we need to watch, because that instability can create bigger problems. Long term, these technologies are going to allow us to do more. And I think that's the one thing that people tend to miss is, these jobs are going to go away because a computer can do everything that currently somebody does in a job. But what it doesn't count for is the second and third order effects, where because that job doesn't need to be done, we can do other jobs that currently nobody is doing. That's exciting, and that's a reason for long-term optimism, I think, that we should all embrace and doesn't get talked about nearly enough.
Yeah, let me, if I may, add to this point. Let me share with you a couple of stories and maybe a historical anecdote. My very first job in my life, in a lot of your age group, was to work at a Samsung supercomputing laboratory. I had this sort of grand ambition, as it were. As I was growing up, I was reading about the so-called fifth generation computer project, which is sort of a Japanese government's attempt. I can't recall the exact ministry. Do you remember the Ministry of Information and Science and Technology? Yeah, MISTY. That wanted to bring Japan to sort of the AI age, if you will. The success of which is assessed at various levels. In any event, I had this grand ambition. I will go to Samsung, get a job at supercomputing lab, and do some crazy data crunching, and maybe come up with some sort of funky, machine that can do all sorts of funky things. Okay, so I had the hardware ready. And at the time, it was quite fashionable. In my previous incarnation, I was trained as a theoretical physicist. So I had all the mathematical arsenals of theoretical physics, statistical mechanics, Boltzmann equations, you name it. Right? And to be able to apply this to making use of this very expensive piece of hardware. Turns out, in a nutshell, there weren't enough data to analyze with the expensive hardware and an ensemble of mathematical algorithms. But now, there's a proliferation of so-called data scientists whose job it is to analyze large volumes of data using, I was going to say, expensive pieces of hardware. They're not anymore, because it turns out that you can make all sorts of very powerful machines on your desktop even. and proliferation of all sorts of mathematical libraries, some of which, by the way, are provided by IBM. Thank you very much. TensorFlow and Amazon Web Services, Azure, Microsoft, and so forth. So you can, if you are driven and have the ambition to delve into AI and tinker, you can do a lot these days. Right? So, so that's one sort of optimistic example that back in the day, I was stuck with theoretical work. So yeah, so this, and the ending of that story, the Samsung story, is essentially ended up having to do sort of, ended up writing a paper out of it, but it was essentially a theoretical work. No funky machine that I was able to make out of it. So that's one example. Another quick example has to do with the so-called chatbots. So about early 2000s, I kind of thought, wouldn't that be funky if I could get if I could create a piece of software that enables you to talk to a website. So you go to, for example, I don't know, IBM.com or what have you, and out comes a little sort of text window of sorts. Could be a pop-up window or a little tiny window at the bottom of the window, and it would ask you questions. Hi, I am so-and-so. I'm here to help you. So I actually made this one piece of software that got to the point where you can ask, for example, who is so-and-so of the company, and it'll tell you, so-and-so is the CEO of the organization. And I showed it to the CEO, and he nearly fell off his chair. Now, that didn't really sort of take off, so to speak. But now, as you probably know, a lot of websites have this service, so-called chatbots. And again, this is the kind of thing that you can do, free of charge. Yeah.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of skills, new tools that people need to acquire and to learn in order to actually be in touch with the next wave of growth in terms of careers. What are actually the support systems, from the governments to the educational facilities that are there that will help the future talent to actually grow? So, Julia, from your experience in IBM and also with the governments, what is their role in actually?
Well, as my former colleague has said, this is a huge challenge for governments, for academia, and for industry, because no one entity can address this massive cultural change, way of thinking change, way of organizing ourselves and really defining ourselves as workers. So it really is what the European Union likes to call a triple helix. It has to be industry, academia, and government coming together to forge new training models, new research models. We've been working here with the MCIT to do training around areas like cloud, application development, cybersecurity, another huge growth area which will be intimately linked with artificial intelligence. We've also been working with the Misk Foundation to have university students come and do internships with us. And we've also been working with universities around the world to your point, to redefine what is a university degree so that it is much more an extension of your schooling and much more about working and learning by doing and experiential rather than the traditional linear approach. But I think at the end of the day, it still all comes down to understanding that in the fourth industrial revolution, collaboration, concentric circles of cooperation will be the new models for the future. It will not be as easy as you leave secondary school, you go to university, you then get handed off to a corporation. It will be a complex intertwining of all of these elements at very early stages in the education system.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that front also, Jaeyoung, what is the impact of AI on society and the future in that? And what are some of the findings that that KGMLabs have also seen on that front?
Well, I think the immediate story that is interesting people is whether my job's going to exist or not. I mean, that's the number one question that comes to mind. For youngsters, obviously, we're trying to prepare them well to cope with this new world and new technology. And like all the panelists says that we need to come up with the new ways to educate our youngsters. But another thing is that AI poses another question is actually an ethical question. Whether AI or smart AI and whatever we call it, we've seen this in movies and and books and whatnot, science fictions and whatnot. but we don't even know what this AI is going to develop into. I mean, people are quite confident that these AI will be able to control what kind of activities that AI is going to be involved in. But do we really know? I mean, that's the question that we're trying to answer, and we have very huge arguments around this on this topic. But the point is that whatever it's going to turn out to be, we need to make sure that we educate our youngsters at very early stage that what AI or any new technology can do and how humanity should handle it. And on top of that, you just asked what kind of jobs will be quite successful within the AI world. I think one of the jobs that will survive is the area of conflict management. I'm not saying that because I'm a politician, but I think in terms of conflict management, it is something that humanity has practiced over thousands of years. And it is something that I don't think AI can just move in and solve all the human conflicts. I mean, there are so many interests and so many conflicts out there. So, and we see that every day. So I think if we can prepare that well, we'll still be able to have area or safe zone for us to find jobs, and maybe it'll even grow into something a bigger portion compared to now. But again, come back to my original point, is that whatever that happens, history shows that it's going to happen so much faster than what we had expected, and mostly all governments, and I would say literally all governments in the world, are not prepared to deal with the speed.
And one critical point that you mentioned is around educating the youngsters and the new sort of generation. And I'd like to point this question to Jake. What is our current educational system? Is it fit for purpose for this new digital innovation that's moving at much faster paces than the curriculum can adopt? And what General Assembly is doing on that front?
Yeah, I think it's fairly clear that the traditional educational system, and this is everything from K through 12 and secondary, evolved slowly over a couple hundred years to serve a very specific purpose. Or in many ways, even when it was serving the purpose of the Industrial Revolution, it was very much retrofitted to fit that and to serve that. Now what we're seeing is a need to move a lot faster, to be a really interesting and different mix of practical and theoretical. And some of the things that we sort of all believe now are super important in terms of what somebody needs to learn in a well-rounded education are starting to be challenged. I also think the systems themselves need to be shifted. We put way too much money into this idea of a degree and the resources that go into that as opposed to the skills and the pathways that we're creating. So GA was really set up to blow that up and to create much more efficient pathways into work. And that's what we're doing around the world. And we're very proud of the work we're doing here with MISC Academies. Creating very focused programs for young people where, coming out of the program, the early data we're seeing here is that people can increase their salary and earning potential by over 50%. And so there's a huge amount of opportunity, but we tend to think it's about starting from first principles, looking at the skills that employers want and need and are in demand, and training around those in a way that both creates that immediate opportunity, but doesn't sacrifice the long-term development of that person as well. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that sort of unbundling of what we used to consider this degree as the pinnacle of educational experience, and being replaced by very select moments that serve specific purposes to serve both that individual and society at large.
Definitely more flexible agendas and curriculum on that front. Our time is running up. We can basically get 1 or 2 questions from the audience if we have any key questions. Number 2. If you can state your name and basically your question directly.
Hello, My name is Yazid Marwani. I want to ask about the AI. With the advancement of AI, it might reach the AI, artificial superintelligence. How can we manage something that is smarter than us, and how can we just build a backdoor in the neural network to turn it off if something happens wrong, if it gets out of hand?
To whom it's maybe Julia, you want to take a.
I didn't hear.
So basically, just to rephrase, how can we actually manage a super intelligent sort of AI form of intelligence, especially given the sort of.
How do we beat Skynet?
Yeah.
Let me try to tackle this. Okay. So it was Albert Einstein that said there are two things in the world that are infinite. One is the universe, and the other is human stupidity. And another thing he added was that I'm not sure about the universe. So he, I suppose, has somewhat of a bleak view about the nature of humanity and where we stand in terms of. I don't think he's necessarily discussing intelligence in terms of raw cognition. I think he meant, or at least my understanding of it is that we have this tendency to destroy, ourselves and nature and so forth. So, I suppose I dropped out of high school at the age of 15 to become a monk. I spent about a year trying to become sort of a, you don't know this. Yeah. So I've never really believed in learning skills for the sake of learning skills per se, especially the types of skills that you can acquire can be put to danger or destruction of mankind or nature. So I think dealing with superintelligence is the kind of thing that it can be a destructive force if we're not cognizant of the values that we inculcate, or the values that we imbue the machines that we're building. In other words, whatever moral choice the autonomous machine makes will be based on or be informed by some sort of human value, some sort of value system that we've got, right? So we have to figure this out. And now there's no such thing as universal belief system or value system. Whatever it is, we need to figure this out, and I believe it's education's job, a critical job, augmenting the types of work that, for example, Jake is doing, questioning what it is that makes us decent beings, what it is that makes us. So it's really more about human beings. That's kind of the paradox and the irony of AI. It calls into question who we are as human beings. Shukra.
And maybe
I really did just want to quickly echo that. I mean, our chairman likes to talk about good tech and bad tech. And that's grounded in a belief that we can't just assume AI will be good. We have to demand, as citizens, as business people, as young people, as government officials, that AI is transparent, that we know the algorithms, we know the human biases that do and don't go into a system, that we have full disclosure on what's happening underneath that black box, because if we don't, we'll lose the trust of our citizens. And that is something that from today, we can begin to legislate. We can demand as consumers trust and transparency. Who is the data coming from? Who owns the data? Who's doing what with the data? We can demand that now through codes of conduct. Industry is coming together, AI and ethics, to try to provide some frameworks. But really, the time is now for all of us in the room to demand good tech and to say we're on the side of open and trusted and transparent.
Yep, absolutely. One final question from number 4.
Hi, Steve Brazil from Hitman Inc. in New York City. And great panel. The question I've got for you is, if I'm a student sitting here, I want to know, what do I need to be doing now? And I think that the challenge is with AI is a huge misconception, as you've talked about, which is that it's Skynet, which it's not. The number one, from a study that was done in New York City, was the number one most in-demand skill for kids coming out of school is complex problem solving.
Yes.
Right? Because, look, AI is going to solve all the easy things. Glidden talked about stamps and bureaucracy going away. AI is solving that. So can you just give us some insights? Maybe Jake and Glidden could touch on if you're going to help a student today understand that I've got to learn how to solve complex problems, what should they be doing now?
Absolutely. So first off, what is a complex problem? It typically involves a lot of inputs and a goal or a challenge or an optimal way of doing something. I think that can be broken down into a few different disciplines, right? Some of them are intellectual in nature, right? Being able to diagnose a situation, have a hypothesis-driven approach, which is really what all of science is based on. So the scientific method still is very relevant today. And then it's really about using these tools, and they're much more complex tools, to be able to solve these problems. And those tools are all built on a series of techniques. Everything from linear regression to incredibly complex natural language algorithms. They're all versions of this quantitative modeling of the world. And so I think this starts with numeracy. It starts with finding a way to develop you as a young person, your relationship to data. How do you understand? How do you deal with numbers? How do you use numbers in whatever you do? At GA, inside GA, we have a work value that we say all the time, which is always bring data to the conversation. And that, I think, is that's sort of a habit that we all can get into, is where can I go get information and numerical proof of what I believe and what I am trying to argue for in my role, wherever that is. And I think focusing on the quantitative approaches that are relevant for your discipline, your passion, your role, is a perfect window into the skill set that everyone is going to need, regardless if you're doing design or software engineering. It doesn't matter. It's all going to be on a foundation of data, and the expectation is that you will be able to use that data in more and more sophisticated ways. This is a great opportunity. It means sometimes using Microsoft Excel. It sometimes means using TensorFlow. Sometimes it means just being able to sort a set of data on a sheet and be able to synthesize ideas out of that. And so everyone is going to need to upgrade their facility and comfort with numbers. And I think that's my core recommendation for all students, regardless of their passion or specialty.
In supporting Jake's point, I think ministries of educations all over the world, they need to have very flexible mind and attitude about incorporating or at least applying these new technologies and methodologies to their school system as immediately, as fast as possible, every time the new methodology comes up. My final comment.
So as a final note, we've seen that the potential of AI is huge, and one final key takeaway is that there's a lot of resources that you can utilize from educational facilities, innovation labs, corporations, and governments, and we're trying to see how we can all work together collaboratively to actually enhance the future of work. I'd like to thank our amazing panelists, and I'd like to thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.